So today we're going to talk about how VF Corporation leverage on robotics with Locus. And for this amazing case study today, see the sun is coming. We've got here Denis Nizgoda on the right side, which is VP Europe for Locus Robotics, and Brad Sampson, which is VP of Product Flow and Fulfillment for VF Corporation. The idea is to go through the details of a specific case study with these two gentlemen here. And this is an open conversation, right? So you will get the case study presented by both gentlemen. If you wish to ask a question to interact at the idea of the case study, feel free to do it, right? That's going to be a conversation between everyone. So as a retailer, as a vendor, feel free to ask questions on implementation, metrics, and so on. We'll go through a couple of topics, but I leave it to you. So maybe we can start with a quick introduction. Denis, can you tell us a bit more about Locus Robotics and maybe your role in the company?
Of course, thanks, Damien, and welcome. And on behalf of Locus, thanks a lot for attending this session. So I'm VP of Europe for Locus Robotics. I'm overseeing our international expansion into the European continent. And Locus Robotics is originating out of the United States. I'll take a few minutes to explain the Locus value proposition. And we launched our international expansion 2 years ago here into the market, have now 19 deployments here in Europe across 7 countries and more than 1,500 robots in place. And continuing with that international expansion here, maturing the organization across multiple domains, as well as starting to slowly but surely launch our business in APAC as well, which we're going to drive from here initially. So very briefly about Locus Robotics, as you may see also in the video in the background, Locus Robotics is a mobile robot provider focused on fulfillment applications, specifically addressing each picking. Each picking, which is taking place in e-commerce operations for wholesale replenishment, but also outside of the retail industry amongst automotive or pharmaceutical environments. And the value proposition that Locus is focused on, Locus is absorbing walk time in manual pick operations. So if you think about your processes today, if you may not use automation or any mechanization, you have associates who push and pull pick carts for picking processes as well as replenishment. And Locus comes in play here, replacing those pick carts, absorbing the walking time by meeting the picker actually at the pick location. With that absorption of walk time, we're increasing the time that can be spent on the actual picking. So in other words, we're increasing pick efficiency and ultimately productivity of every single associate. The major benefits of this solution are the natural navigation that our solution is using. Every single warehouse you see here on those videos has been in place before. So our solution is integratable into every single existing facility. If you think about stationary automation, it usually comes into play if you build a new facility, if you have multiple years of time in planning, if you have the capital in order to invest into stationary automation. Locus is also focused on greenfield sites as well. But the major adoption currently is within existing environments. And you can see the form factor, it's very nimble. You can also see the solution at our booth here. Let me just reinforce, we're exhibiting here so you can interact with the solution. But ultimately, it's an easy to use, quickly to be deployed solution, empowering the worker to do more and also facilitate their work environment. You can see in some of those sceneries here the interaction with a user interface. It's a simple iPad, very well visualized to facilitate the pick process. And with that, we're also reducing training time and overall improving the associates' environment. That said, a few other points probably in a few minutes here before monologue too long here. Yeah,
that's already a very deep introduction. Thank you, Denis. Brad, maybe you can tell us a bit more about your role and VF Corporation.
Great, thanks, Damien. Brad Sampson with VF Corporation, responsible for our product flow and fulfillment, which is really distribution, outbound logistics, as well as customs compliance. You may not be fully familiar with VF, but I'm sure you have many of our products. We have over 10 brands that we service in the EMEA region, from Vans, Timberland, the North Face, Kipling, Eastpak, Napapiri, Icebreaker, I could go on and on and on. But what we do is we fulfill all channels for all those brands in the region. And so when I think about kind of why we got into this, I know this is a future question, but I might as well just jump right in. It really came from North America. We have a lot of what Dennis calls stationary automation here in Europe, but in North America we don't. So when COVID hit, there was a dramatic spike in those digital orders that everybody's familiar with, and all of our sites, we have over 20 DCs across the globe. Most of them are what you see on that video that says manual picking, manual pick carts, a lot of walking, a lot of time, couldn't keep up with the demand. So that's kind of what brought the relationship together, was that need in North America. And what I found at VF is if they've jumped onto a solution in North America, it makes it very easy to take that solution here without a lot of approval steps. And so we were able to find solutions here in Europe as well.
All right. So this decision to invest in automation was actually thought about a bit prior to the COVID. And what were the main criteria you were looking at when going through automation?
Good question. So in North America, when they were looking for a solution, they were looking for something very quick, right? That we needed to be able to react quickly, or else we were going to lose digital sales. So the key criteria was really a seamless integration, and I mean that both physically and systemically. When you look at the operation, you're looking for a solution that can come in and you don't have to move a lot of things around to make it work, right? It comes into your operation, the Locus team maps it out and says, all right, you might need to change, but we didn't really need to change a lot of our operations physically. So then it comes down to how quickly you can connect the Locus system to our system. And we run one PKMS, or Manhattan Associates software, but many different versions of it. So we wanted to have a partnership where someone was nimble enough to be able to connect to our different versions and allow us to configure and implement quickly, because we have multiple sites running this in North America. So it really was how quickly we can integrate physically and systemically, and how do we find the right partnership, knowing that this is a long-term investment that we're going to need going forward, because COVID will hopefully end soon, but what it did to our shopping habits won't end. So we know this is going to just be a continual need across the business.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're going to go through more details about the implementation, but Dennis, how would you say that Locus meet that criteria and the challenges that actually VF were looking for?
Right. I think summarizing the challenges that VF, amongst many other retailers, may have is during the pandemic, the need for urgency, the need for flexibility because of existing uncertainty how business will evolve, and scalability in order to respond to changing demands. And natural navigation, the way we systemically implement our sites, is allowing us to implement very quickly. Assuming the connection endpoints to a warehouse management system are in place, we can physically implement in a number of days. Typically 3 to 4 weeks, it all takes time from testing into full production. But the shortest time frame we've had actually in the Netherlands with a site, you can also see on those videos, it took us 10 days to get the solution up and running. It takes a day to map the site, it's taking another day to configure every single nuance in the map, and then following that, full production testing with connection endpoints is allowing us to do that very quickly. Next to that, to the urgency here, again, focusing on the nimbleness of this product, you may emotionally think the bigger the better. This is historically driven by manual operations, where you have to walk distance, you have your pick route, and the more you can pick along that path, the better. However, with the Locus solution, we're absorbing that walking, and the nimbleness allows us to reduce cycle times because we're separating either full orders or the number of orders, and bringing all those bots towards the associates. So they're focused on that absorption and that horizontal automation. And then the scalability aspect here, also impacted by the nimbleness. We can add bots as needed. So you always have in the automation space the challenge, you need to determine what is your maximum throughput requirement. So you build your stationary automation, you build your conveying technology, your mechanization based on that expected demand. With our solution, you get started, and then you just simply add bots. Commercially, we allow that. We can dive deeper into that as well. But you don't need to worry about purchasing the solution and then keeping those bots no matter what your throughput is looking like. But we throw in additional bots, and then after a month or two, following peak, for example, we take those bots away. We'll do that with your peak as well, which is hitting very soon as well.
Okay. Any questions so far in the assembly, or can we just go on? Yes. No, please.
So what is the biggest size of items you can pick with these boards?
So the question is about size and dimension and even weight. I'll let Dennis answer.
Excellent. So you cannot pick a snowboard as an example, so that would be a no-go. The cubic dimensions of the system are, currently we talk about roughly 70 liters, if that's a tangible number. What we're looking at here is, it may be seen in some of the videos there, you actually saw one example. We're not limited to the form factor of the robot itself. At the very end, think of it's one dot on a map, and it's these other dots it needs to pass. Now we can make that robot think bigger by changing the parameters and therefore put larger form factors on the robot itself. Then next to that, we'll bring out a new iteration of this product fairly soon, which will have different cubic dimensions, more flexibility, more configurational possibilities. And you may have seen that we acquired a company called Waypoint Robotics, focused on different form factors, which are now being integrated into the product suite of Locus, including our enterprise software on top of that.
And what that means for us at VF is each one of our distribution centers is fulfilling orders for a different brand, and we have different carton sizes for different channels. So the wholesale channel obviously has bigger cartons than for an e-com channel. And what we're doing is at each site we might have to have a different tray size or tray dimensions or multiple levels that we can pick multiple e-com orders at the same time. So again, very flexible, very configurable, very easy to do depending on your site.
Jumping on that, Brad, what key metrics do you measure at VF Corporation during the implementation and also after, maybe on the long-term run?
Yeah, it's quite simple, really. In our sites, we had engineered standards, so we understand pretty detailed way of how long it takes to pick an order, and we're batch picking those orders, 3 or 4 orders at a time. So when Locus makes the proposition and they come in and they do the evaluation and show us what they expect the productivity impact is, we know exactly what they're measuring on not only just the walk time that they can eliminate, but also the picking speed as well. You know, we're picking with RF guns or we're using headsets on voice picking. So to be able to compare that with picking with an iPad where it's a simple touch and scan, we can measure the differences in the productivity increase in both those areas. And then here on our sites in Prague, we have a separate e-com area from our retail and wholesale. So we have separate metrics for those because the order profiles are very different. So that's really what we're tracking is picking productivity at the detailed level, not just overall what's your units per hour, but within the picking, are we really seeing kind of what they promise as the productivity improvement? So.
Okay, and does this align with what do you see at other clients' spot, like this kind of metrics measurement?
I very much agree with that. At the very end, it's mainly the productivity aspect. There are different soft factors around this, but if you cannot create economic benefits with automation, or you may have a very critical labor situation, you usually look at cost at the very end. However, to name a few soft factors, it's the training time. The training time as you implement new associates, specifically in peak, where people are coming in for free for weeks, and they know they're coming just in for free for weeks. So with RF guns, training may be a little bit more difficult. Again, the user intuitiveness. Damien, if you would start being a picker in one of our operations for one day, all we tell you is go into your aisle, do what the robot is telling you to do, and go next where the robot is asking you to go next. But one important aspect I'd like to add is safety. The system itself, it's an autonomous robot that operates in a human environment, and there's always a concern around safety. We have many customers who pushed and pulled those heavy carts, and partially the demographic changes result in associates getting older and older in warehouse environments, and fairly often you have accidents where those carts are, bumping into other people. People may, not have the strength to actually stop the cart because it's fairly heavy, because again, you try to put as much work as possible in those. With our system, this example, it's one of our largest sites with boots, with more than 200 bots. We actually reduced the number of accidents, which is an important factor to us as well.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
And I can add on, well, I'll come to you in a second. On that same point is, we were not surprised, but I guess pleasantly surprised at just how quickly the associates on the floor understand the value proposition of what Locus brings. They didn't look at the automation and go, oh great, there goes my job. They instantly saw the worst part of my job of pushing and pulling this cart goes away. Within an instant, they were able to see that. And then as they start to interact with the bots, they start to enjoy, their work a lot more because that heavy burden has been taken away. And a lot of the safety issues, peak season, people are walking a little bit faster, picking a little bit faster, which means as they go around the corner, they bump into racks a little bit faster, and that's what causes injuries and damages. And all that stuff goes away, and it really allows them to focus on the most important part, which is picking the right unit at the right time. And you also mentioned metrics. And one of the things that I get really excited about, I'm an engineer by university and education, so I kind of geek out on this stuff. It allows you, once you get all this data on how you're operating in your current state, simple changes on how your layout of the pick flow can be instantly evaluated after a couple weeks of, did you really reduce the travel time of the bot? It's not just the pickers. You want the bots to have the shortest distance to get to that next pick. So how long is it taking distance-wise? How long are the bots waiting before the picker gets to that bot? That's kind of that wait time for me is, if you're waiting too long, that means you don't have enough pickers. If they're not waiting long enough, you might have too many pickers. Yeah. So really being able to find that balance of some of those metrics, that all the data that comes from them really makes that stuff a lot easier.
Very interesting.
I just want another question, because we see that in one of the videos that you also operate in high racks, right? Where you basically pick the low level you pick by food and the high level you pick by high level wall pickers whatsoever. Do you as a customer have some experience in how is that for the high-level order picker drivers with all the additional traffic now? Are they confused? Are they saying that, I feel disturbed, I cannot drive as fast as usual?
And as a customer, we don't operate in that way. We've got dedicated pick areas, so I'll let Dennis answer that for others.
But interestingly, Brad asked me the same question literally 30 minutes ago. So no, it's a good question. We do have mixed traffic with our solution, and there are different ways of how to think about solving that. On the one side, I'm not sure you can see that in the videos, but we do use blue safety light as a standard practice in the space. There you can see it. Next to that, we do have different connectivity applications where forklift drivers are being alerted if bots are close by. And we're looking to integrate forklifts also as a connection, as a dot inside our map, so our bots know in advance where the different MEG traffic is yeah, exactly. And then next to that, we also, speaking of a high level of configurability, we can determine specific paths within the aisles that bots only utilize, and then forklifts do utilize the remaining proportion of it. Closing aisles, so pickers and bots actually bypass that specific inventory until, for replenishment purposes, that aisle has been opened up again. So there are different ways of how to think about it. I would say 20–30% of our sites are actually not that type of bookshelf environment, but more high bay racking where we actually interact with different systems. And in the long term, if I'll just may add one additional comment, our long term with our acquisition of Waypoint looks at becoming a warehouse execution platform to automate multiple use cases in the same space where those different solutions will interact with each other. And you have interleaved tasks that allow you to utilize the same labor for doing different work. Picking, replenishment, and the bots themselves bring that work into those concentrated environments.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead. Can you just quickly introduce yourself, the company, and the role that's going to be helpful for? Thank you.
Sure. My name is Sven Thies, and I'm Director of Logistics at Zalando. And I'd be highly interested also in the benefits that you see during operations. So how did the pick rate increase for the pickers themselves? And also with regards to implementing it or migrating it to the environment, how flexible are you interfacing with other warehouse management systems and standard points?
And I'll take the first part of that question. You can take the second. We're expecting to see at least 30 to 50% productivity improvements in some of the areas, and even more than that in others. So we've got 2 different sites here in Europe. One's in Prague, and the other one's in just outside of Antwerp. Slightly different picking operations, and definitely different picking labor costs. But we still expect to see a significant improvement in both those areas. We just went live a couple months ago with Prague, so we're still in what I would call the optimization phase, and then the Belgium site goes live in a couple weeks. So more to come on that, but we definitely are going to hold the expectation of what, and when Locus comes in and does their evaluation, they've got vast experience as to what they see in all their different configurations. So when they see the way we do picking, they know historically, based on their models and other customers, what they can deliver. So I'm quite confident we'll get there. I'll let Dennis talk about just the integration piece.
And before I do that, just a short comment on productivities. Very much encouraged to look at the different case studies we have. We invest a lot into that, where you hear customers speaking and referring to productivity increase. And at the very end, it's a sort of salesy thing to say it's 2 to 3x. It's not in every single case 2 to 3x. The more and better performing a site is already, the lower the margin may be to increase productivity, the lower the leeway is actually. But the spectrum lies between 30 to 40% up to 300%. We do have cases like that as well. The Boots example here went from 40 lines, 40 pick positions per hour to 120 roughly. So that's a 3x example. Coming to your second part of the question, I do believe you're operating your own in-house developed WMS. We do have experience with the standards, like Manhattan has been mentioned as an example, Blue Yonder. We have more than 25 very standardized integrations, but then we are individually integrating into bespoke systems as well, which is typically from a man-hour perspective the highest workload along the implementation. But we do have experience with very specific bespoke systems as well.
Thank you.
I want to come back just to one of your points earlier when you were asking about shutting down the aisle and just traffic and picking, and you've got all those different material handling equipment. One of the things that I really like about Locus's approach is they want you to really understand how to configure and make sure that you're using all the flexibility that the system has to offer, because they're very busy. They don't have time. If we wanted to shut down an aisle just because we were going to work here and pull some pallets down, they want you to understand how to do that. And within VF, we've got really strong fulfillment teams that are eager to get at projects like this, and they want to become experts. And so as a vendor, they're not holding back saying, no, that's what we know, you just operate. It's the opposite. It's really them trying to transfer as much knowledge, and then us giving a lot of ideas back to them to say, hey, can you do this a little bit differently? So that's why we really feel that it's a strong partnership, because it allows our teams to get really excited about owning the operation as much as possible.
And Dennis, have you got some feedback from clients that you've actually implemented on rolling out new solutions, or the way you actually develop other projects? Like, how do you react to this kind of feedback coming from clients?
We've got a couple suggestions, so I'm interested in Dennis's answer.
Right. So as we're not selling our solutions, we're not translating ownership. We have a service model, and our service model is not just only providing bots and providing the flexibility to add additional bots. We provide as a service everything with one fee, which is including the bots. With that, productivity increase, repairs are included into that as well. But at the very end, it's really the aftermath of customer success, which is specifically a term within the SaaS space. We took that account on our side as well, because we see the lifetime value in customers based on our model, and with that, we are investing into our optimization engines next to a defined product management dialogue with our customers. customer. So we're building a bridge between the customer and our R&D and engineering efforts to strategically define what are additional development needs, what are potential improvement ideas. A lot is configurational, it's a lot software, and with that we're then collectively co-creating new features that may be needed. The product itself, we've been privileged to focus on one product that we were able to mature, specifically on the business enterprise side, where we actually have, I would say, more than half of the configurational expansions are coming from customer ideas that we're then feeding into, we're prioritizing it. We cannot do all of it at the same time, but we're continuously improving the solutions. As with your iPhone, hardware is not changing, but the software is changing. Your product is evolving. Maybe not as much as 5 years ago, but your product is still evolving over time.
All right. Another question. Yes, sir.
My name's Chris Crispin, and I head an e-commerce division for a fashion retailer called Bestseller. I've got 3 questions for you. The first one is there any specific flooring requirements needed for these bots? Is there a certain tolerance level? There's obviously a lot of bots you need that. The second question is, you mentioned boots there, and you've got 200 bots in boots.
That's right, yeah.
What sort of level of units per day would you kind of expect from 200 bots in your organisation? And the third question is, in a 24-hour operation, how does this work in a 24-hour? Because obviously it needs to be.
Yeah, very good questions. I hope I'll remember them all after another. Related to the flooring question, the advantages we have here in comparison to stationary automation or goods-to-person robots is the weight. It's a lightweight product, coming back to the safety aspect, but also being applicable in any existing environment. So one bot is 45 kilos. With that, we don't have any needs on increasing or reinforcing mezzanine structures, for example. It's highly utilizable within mezzanine structures. And then there may be smaller holes, our wheels have their limitations. Those are smaller, minor configurations. There are some standards in terms of what the potential slope is, but essentially nothing in the existing warehouse or a plant warehouse that would be of any concern. Related to the 200 bots in this particular site, so in this regard, we're speaking about lines of 135,000 lines per day. If you translate that into units, it very much comes down to the pick task time per every single unit, but we're focused in most cases on pick positions that we can accomplish per hour. But in this case, it's an e-com site, you have multiple units per line. The 135,000, you can multiply that by maybe 1.3 to 1.5 to determine the number of units in this case. But we do have larger operations as well. Our largest site in the US is now more than 450 bots, also in the retail space, where we pick more than that. And then related to your last question, in a 24/7 operation, this is a 24 operation, by the way. The system itself is self-managed with in terms of inductive charging. I'm very much welcome you at our trade show later on here at our booth. We have also our charging unit here, so you can see how the system behaves there. But the narrative here is that the system is self-managing its charging state. So when we're going live into operations, we determine the number of charges needed, the percentage of how many bots usually charge. It's typically 10% of the whole fleet is charging. It's a 45-minute charge for 80%, and the solution is deployable about 14 hours on one single charge. And then again, as bots need or require charge, they simply do it themselves. There we also have specific features based on customers having specific requests on how the system should actually behave. So yeah, that's how we manage it.
And I think it's the question about 24 hours, I think, is a really an interesting one, because for us, especially here in Europe, we're focused on the challenge of finding the right labor, the right quantity and quality of labor, and also the labor costs that go with it. But having the bots is changing the way we're thinking about our shift structure. Do we go to 7 days a week? Because now we can take our existing labor and spread it out and let the bots fill in the gaps and improve our e-com service and working more hours. So I think that's where we gain some, because obviously the more you can use the bots, the better your return on investment is going to be. So it does change some of the conversations that you might be having. But if you're already 24/7, then you'll get the full utilization.
And beyond the hard numbers and ROI, were there any surprising benefits using the bots? And we talk about the collaboration between the workforce and the bots. Anything else you wanted to mention that was not necessarily planned, in the implementation?
So we're considered as part of this whole digital transformation journey. Umbrella terms like digitization are, I think, in everybody's mouth, and I'm sure it's being discussed a lot here. Locus is one of the solutions that has scaled and matured a product that is deployed in more than 100 sites. If DHL, Geodis, Siva, VF, others wouldn't have, they wouldn't have multiple sites if it wouldn't work. The initial installs with Locus may be, in many environments, the very first solution of digital adoption. And it actually, the fact that the solution works, that we actually see value in it, is sparking and motivating organizations to do more around that. We've seen that with Boots. Boots has been our first site here in Europe, and they started with Locus, but they started to add on top of that automated packaging machines, additional data analytics, other IoT devices to become a truly digital fulfillment environment. And Locus can support that digital adoption because it's an easy start. You're not committing to too much capital. And you can take the solution always out. When we also go into new customer environments, we provide every single customer the option. Brad still has that option to pull the solution out. And we take the whole solution back. And you don't have any additional stationary infrastructure you suddenly need to deal with, which you invested in before. So we're providing that time frame for our customers and give you the solution. If you don't like it, we take it on our own cost back out of the environment. So I think that's it's a very, very important fact we actually see as a dynamic with many customers.
And I think one of the maybe surprising things for us when we think about designing our next site is we always push towards trying to get that stationary automation to get the biggest throughput for that capital. But a lot of the times the capital required for that, the return on investment just isn't there. And so the next step we can do is say, all right, well, we're familiar with Locus. How do we design our next warehouse with Locus in mind? And that's very different than Locus coming in and saying, how do we fit into your existing operations? It's now getting them as part of the design to say, what are the most successful layouts for, you know our brands, you know our products, you know our order profile. If we were to start somewhere new, how would you help us do that? So I think that was something that we probably didn't think about, a year ago when we were just pushing to try and get this in to get the increase in capacity and labor savings. So something else to think about.
So are you planning on expanding a relationship with robots and with automation in general?
Yeah, for sure. With Locus in the EMEA region area, we've got the 2 sites that we're going live in, and then the next step says how do we fit into our other 3 or 4 sites that we have going on. But then as expansion, we start talking about expanding to support the growth of the brands. I think that's where the next level discussion will take place, for sure.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Especially in e-commerce, you see these peak times in Q4, Cyber Week, Christmas business, and the likes. So how do you deal with this? Do you have a solution in place that covers the peak week and maybe not utilized to the full extent for the remainder of the year? Or do you have some sort of flexibility with regards to ramping up the number of robots that you have in place and then ramping down afterwards again?
Mm-hmm. I may start general, and then from a VF perspective, probably interesting to learn as well. So the business model itself is focused on not purchasing the solution, but providing you the number of bots as a service. And typically the way we think about it is we're building a design point for your year-round fleet needed. So you don't think about day over day, 365 days, what is my fluctuation looking like? With that, we try to determine a business case for year-round. Then when it comes to peak, whether it's a week, 2, 3, 4, whether it's 2 to 3 months, we're designing for that additional volume throughput requirement on top of our initial conceptualization, and then we plan peak together with our customers, where we then add those additional bots into the mix without any configurational needs on site. You just simply add those bots. They're coming pre-configured. They're loading the map once they're on site. You turn them on like a computer, 2 minutes. You localize the bot on site, and it's ready to go. So we provide you those robots, and then when you don't need those robots anymore, we take them out again. If you need extension, that's fine as well. You may ask, because it's a question approaching us very often, how do you manage that business model as an organization? How do you make money? Because at the very end, we have also shareholders and different motivations for what we do. But we're actually, and we're going to start with that. We just, I'm sure some of you may join us later today in our Amsterdam head office, where we're launching our operations to refurbish those bots. So it's a critical part of our business. After peak, we take those bots back, refurbish those, inspection, some repairs maybe, and then we reintroduce those bots into the next customer environment. With that, we're able to properly utilize our assets and also avoid any disposal and any waste. And then just one last comment to give you a flavor. We double the size of bots. So if in case you need 40 or 50, we then increase that to 100 as needed for peak. Boots is a great example because they started with 85 bots. For peak, the November-December timeframe, they needed 50 additional bots, so that's 135. And then the pandemic actually had hit. And the pandemic closed 2,000 stores in the UK. It accelerated the volumes in e-commerce. If you went on the side of e-commerce of Boots to order online, you were number 900,000 in the waiting line, just to give you a flavor of the magnitude that was purchasing online. Since then, that's more than a year ago, Boots is constantly running more than 200 bots because the volume spiked so strongly. And as Brad mentioned, the pandemic may be over, but the consumer patterns don't necessarily go back to what they were before, which is why we're now constantly operating those 200 bots there.
And we also have the ability to use our old method as well, side by side. So just because the bots are in your picking area doesn't mean you still can't use those picking carts for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, just to make sure you're hitting your SLAs.
Okay, we're almost at the end of the session. Do you have any other questions?
Where do you,
Yeah, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Jerome, I work for H&M. Where do you see the biggest difference between your competition? What makes you unique compared to the others?
That's definitely not for me.
That was maybe for you.
So in order to sort of categorize different automation solutions, you have goods-to-person systems, you have other pick-assist robotic solution, and then you have stationary automation, more in form of shuttle systems. First of all, everybody has their own specific work environment. There is a piece of a cake for everyone here. The direct competition, the direct comparison with Six Rivers, for instance, is Six Rivers is thinking about a different principle of how to automate in a collaborative environment. They have launched something what they call a follow bot. So one person is following one robot throughout the entire work environment. With that, the same motivations persist like in manual. The bigger the bot, the better. And you're following that bot at the very end. It may be on the one side a little bit simpler to get started because you don't need to think about labor management and how you cluster your different zones. But you're limited in the productivity increases you can reach because their system is heavier, bigger, so it needs different safety performance levels. That makes the solution a bit more receptive to obstacles or more nervous around obstacles. The speed of bots, specifically here in Europe, related to CE certification is limited. So the people still follow the same route, just that they're without any physical strains. With our solution, we're bringing the work with multiple bots into the same environment. So we will always need more bots with Locus, but your productivity will be also significantly higher. Goods-to-person systems, I think first and foremost the disruption to an existing environment. You cannot simply use a goods-to-person system with your existing ALs. You have higher capital expenses due to the additional infrastructure and the number of bots. But then also here scalability and flexibility. In peak, coming back to your question, with a goods-to-person solution, you need to think about the number of workstations where every single bot is approaching. Your inventory inventory may change. In summer, you may have 10 units in one of those mobile picking units. In winter, you may have only 1 or 2. So that gives you a lot of complexity on how to think about inventory management as well. And then last point here, moving an entire rack requires more payload capability and a much heavier weight of the bot itself. So it's not easy to use on mezzanines, for example. You need to reinforce your mezzanines. That is very often the learning once you signed the deal, actually. But that's something that we've been hearing a lot from the market. And then stationary automations, certainly per picker, higher productivity, but again, capital intensive and the lead time. It takes time to implement such a solution, depending on the size, minimum 12 weeks, I would say even twice that number. And with our solution, you can simply get started and scale as you need.
Thank you. Someone else? Then my maybe last question will be, what's your vision? What's your outlook on the digitizing the warehouse in the future, and how do you see things going on?
I'll let
Yeah, I think this is kind of for us the next step really is to be able to understand how do we take in the data from Locus and really make changes to our operation or change the way we design things. So I think it's just evolutionary. These are the types of things that are going to come in and help us become better at our fulfillment solutions inside the four walls. So for us, we're excited to see what this brings.
Yeah, I'd like to come back to one point that I shared before. We've been very much focused on this particular application because the founders of our solution were actually the second customer of Kiva Systems before it got acquired from Amazon. And our founders were very focused on solving a problem and built robotics around that. And with that focus, we've been able to mature specifically the business software enterprise. And with that asset, we're now starting to expand on different use cases. Each picking specifically will still be the largest addressable market in the robotics fulfillment space. But there are other use cases around that are subject for automation, like case pick to pallet, for example, the replenishment proportion, any horizontal movements from A to B between inbound to storage to outbound, cross-facility navigation, and there are specific company vision with the acquisition of Waypoint is to incorporate different form factors and apply our intelligence on those. Case pick to pallet and sortation will be probably two initial use cases. But then beyond that, I think with the advanced capability of automation, once dexterity is in place, you will think about more manipulation. The holy grail in this industry is always a fully autonomous environment, and we'll see more and more of that throughout the next 3 to 5 years. But if entirely, I believe it's being called a dark warehouse, not a dark store, but a dark warehouse. That is a few years out there. That's probably 10 years out there until we're going to see that.
Yeah. All right. I think we're good. Thanks a lot for your insight. You can find Locus booth at the other end of the hall. And if you don't have any other comments or question, then we can go on. Thank you very much. Thank you, Denise, for this. Thank you, Brad. Thanks a lot.